welcome to the in-person meeting for the Vermont Criminal Justice Council, the September meeting. We've been planning this for a little bit. I'll have to turn on the logistics of the room, but welcome to our guest. Our meeting and others that are in attendance. Should need a swivel chair here. This is a great opportunity. I think first I'd like to thank the staff for coordinating all of this. We talked about doing it, and the next thing you know, Lindsay had it figured out in the room, and it all works. So I didn't really have to do anything but show up. So I'm appreciative of that, as I know we all are. And certainly thanks to the Fire Academy for the use of this room. It's fabulous for an opportunity to come here and have kind of a hybrid meeting. I realized that when Chris and I talked about early in the year having a meeting, physical meeting at the academy, how important that would be. It's good to see it all come together and have a cooperation and partnership with the Fire Academy to be able to use a facility where we could do that. So many thanks to them, and thank those council members who were able to make the trip here today. I know we've probably got a good number of the council members here. I look forward to seeing some of the things that are going on at the academy. We have an afternoon. If you saw the agenda that Lindsay had sent out last week, there was really two agendas that had me thrown for a minute. I thought I missed something, but it's the morning agenda for the meeting, and then the afternoon agenda for those that are able to stay and get a glimpse at various aspects of the functioning of the police academy, which we have the benefit of having a class here and in session. So it should be a pretty vibrant place today, and we'll be able to see a little bit about what goes on. And I think it's important, and again, thanks for those that have made the trip. I think it's important that as a council, as a body that's providing policy oversight, if you will, of the academy, it's important to actually visit. And I know many of you have been here in various capacities in your jobs and in your careers, but as Chris and I have talked about this over the year, I think we'd like to have this be an annual event, at least one meeting on the ground at the academy per year, because we also have new members come on board that may not have the exposure to what happens here. So, things like when we talk about the shooting range, you know where that is, you know what it looks like. You maybe visited. I had the fortune of visiting the shooting range with the last class that was in while they were actually doing live fire, and to go down and see all of that. And that's a very different experience than seeing it on paper when you're here. So thanks to all that have come. I guess the other piece is this is a little bit of an anniversary. When I came on board and officially in August of last year, Chris was newly the executive director of the academy. I said, well, we're freshmen together. Let's see how it goes. And I think it's been a really a powerful year. There's a lot that's going on. We have a lot continuing to go on. But I think my biggest observation to share with folks is the council works as intended. It was expanded, and we do have a committee structure and an expanded membership. We're able to have those perspectives and discussions that I think are important for the academy and what we're doing to prepare law enforcement officers now, but for the things that will be coming in the future in their careers. So with that introduction, I suppose we do have what looks to be a relatively full agenda, but a lot of items that I think will be important. Many that we're not going to be acting on in this meeting, but a few, but others that are part of the ongoing business, and there'll be subsequent probably proposals that we need to endorse or certainly discuss at future meetings. So with that, I'll ask if there are any additions or deletions to the agenda that was previously distributed.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to move that we amend the agenda to remove the domestic violence subcommittee report.
Okay. Any others? We have a move. Do we have a second to that motion to amend the agenda to remove, postpone?
I defer to accounting staff.
Sharing.
I don't know.
We'll leave it to remove it from the agenda for today. Do we have a second for that? Seconded by Vice Chair Stebbins. Any discussion required? Hearing none. All of those in favor of adjusting the agenda to remove that item as stated by Sheriff Anderson, signify by saying aye. Now, I have to pause. I'm looking right at Lindsay. This is a hybrid meeting. The other accomplishment I think we've made this year that I wanted to do was to streamline the voting and move to online voting. But not going to work so well in this environment. So we're going to go with roll call voting on this. We only have a couple of things we have to vote on. So I will turn to Lindsay to guide us through that process.
Thank you. So everybody in the room, we do have a majority in the room. So I'm just going to ask if you're in agreement to please raise your hand and I can mark you. Okay. And then there are two online. So I'm going to roll call for those online. Daniel Guerra.
Aye.
And Glenn Boyd.
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, the motion has passed. We will strike that from the agenda for this meeting. Any further additions or?
Would it be sensible to maybe just go around the introductions for folks that are here and council members that have never met in person before?
I would think that would be well in order. I think we'll begin with Trevor.
All right, thank you. Trevor Whipple, representing the Vermont League of Cities and Towns.
Tom Chanette with the Vermont Police Association.
Which governor appointee?
Sadie Donovan, Vermont Center for Crime Victim Services.
Justin Stedman, Vermont Fish and Wildlife.
Kelly Boufour, I'm the proxy from the Human Rights Commission.
Bill Clements, Chair.
James Von Brown, Chief of Police for Berlin and representative for the Chiefs Association.
Tim Wieters-Dumont, Department of State's Attorneys and Sheriffs. Sheriff Mark Anderson for the Vermont Sheriff's Association.
Dave Peterson for proxy for the Commissioner of Public Safety.
Karen Tronsgard Scott, Vermont Network Against Domestic and Sexual Violence.
Bill,
Lindsay
Lindsay.
Birch, Director of Administration and Compliance.
Staff. Whoever.
Ken Hawkins, Director, Deputy Director.
Is there two on the agenda too?
Take a vote, Mr.
Yeah, Associate General Counsel.
Lisa Ryan, Community Inclusion Director.
Some of our guests.
Okay, Mark Staff, sorry.
Yes.
Jamie Bedard, the Impaired Driving Training Coordinator.
Yes, legislative visitors today.
They like to be full call.
Knowledge, representative South Philly, and Chair of the House Commission. Brian Collmore, State Senator from Rutland County. Up north, Senator Franklin County, and the town of Bellevue, Grandell County. I sit on the division. Rob Plunkett, Senator from the Bank District.
You can go in. I'm muted.
Hi, Keisha Rockensdale. I
don't want
represent Union County. And I'm the Senate Majority Leader, and I came to visit Lisa, but I've never been here before, and we should bring more senators. And here we are, so we're really grateful you're having us.
Well, thank you. We're delighted to have you around. Rachel, get some.
Alicia Millay, rep from Pittsburgh Project.
I'm the head of St. Louis representing the property. Peggy Gates, DLCT property code.
Oh, Dan.
So I'm Tom Moore. Today I am here as consultant with the Police Academy of the
Criminal Justice Council.
Thank you. Okay. Oh, wow, our technical support.
Technical support.
Now, when I walked into the room, he was the most important guy I was looking for when we came in, knowing we were doing a hybrid meeting, so. All right, thank you, Austin. Great, thank you, Chris.
Sorry.
Oh, we gotta do some
That was
online.
on the-
Yes, I'm sorry. See, that's a hybrid meeting. Thank you, Lindsay. Daniel,
Good morning. I'm Daniel Guerra, Governor appointed, and I'm with the Wyndham County NAACP.
Glenn Boyd, I am the proxy for the Department of Corrections.
members online with us today. I'm going to move to the approval of the minutes. That's the next item on our agenda. We have two sets of minutes that we need to act on. First would be the regular Criminal Justice Council meeting of August 6th. We'll start there.
Move to approve the August 6th minutes.
Second.
We have moved and seconded the motion to approve the minutes of August 6th. Any discussion, corrections, amendments? Hearing none, we'll move to the vote. All those in favor of approving the minutes of August 6th signify by raising your hand for those in the room. And for those online, roll call.
Daniel Garrett.
Yeah.
And Glenwood.
Aye.
Hey, the minutes of August 6th have passed. The minutes of August 19th, I will entertain a motion to adopt those.
I can make that motion, Chair.
Vice Chair Stedman moves to adopt the minutes of August 19th. Seconded. I'll let Lindsay fight that one out.
Gotta jump in here quickly.
Any discussion, amendments? Hearing none, we will, again, those in favor of adopting the minutes of August 19th signify in the room by raising your hand. Those online.
Daniel Garrett. Glenn Boyd.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Moving down the agenda, our council, their updates. I think I've given a lot of those. I've been talking too much already at the beginning. So I'm going to move to the executive director updates, Executive Director Bikel to fill us in on a number of things that are happening here.
Thank you, Chair. For those that don't know, Mike O'Neill, who just joined us, is also a council member for Liberty. It's getting late. Thank you. I appreciate everybody being here, especially being in person, and to our guests, anybody that does participate in conversation today. If there's anything I could ask is just to make sure that you speak up so that our folks online will be able to hear you as well as me. So thank you. I will move to my three topics, which I'm going to try to keep relatively brief. But my first one is just kind of an update on O2X for those council members that know that we've been contracting for the last two classes with O2X. And for members of the public that are here today, O2X is a company that has worked with us for the last two classes. We contracted with them. They're a human performance company that work with police, fire, branches of the armed services. They're an overall wellness company. And they stress proper nutrition, stress management, optimizing mental health. And we did that as a result of, we had a couple of recruits that we knew were coming in that had prior diagnosis of RABDO, and we had no expertise to deal with that. It's a fairly significant potential injury, and we want to make sure that we were going to keep people as safe as possible while we were here. So we were really kind of left with, we didn't have an option. We had to go where the expertise was. So we contracted with O2X. It was a fairly expensive contract to get us through two classes. I did put in a budgetary request last year, which was not afforded to us. And we have managed with the help of O2X this past year. So our contract ended June And we extended it from July with some vacancy savings, but also through a grant that O2X provided to us, which they had a source funding from Habitat for Humanity.
Bridges for Hope, Bridges for Hope.
Bridges for Hope, is that the title of it?
I think so.
In any event, they subsidize a large portion of that so that we can continue to do that. And as part of their service, we have an embedded athletic trainer that works with us. So he's somebody that's really good at working with recruits, recognizing where they are in their physical training. And those that have prior injuries or get injured as they're working here or sore, we work through an individualized program with them that's designed just for them to make sure that they're able to continue on and not just injured and have to leave. Our push when we asked for this budgetary wise was really, we're hoping to reduce the overall workers' comp claims for a long person and the longevity of people to be able to stay into the profession, promoting officer wellness as a holistic view. So again, we'll have this contract, but this will go just till the end of this class. And so we're going to be stuck in the same position moving forward next year. So having said that, I'm going to briefly turn to the deputy director because he was involved in a recent online meeting with O2X. And I'll also ask him to just give you a brief update on the ongoing class that's the class that is now here with us. So Ken, if you wouldn't mind.
Good morning. Thank you all for being here. Peggy, nice to meet you. We spent so much time on email. All the things that Trevor included. So O2X has been a game changer for us in terms of PT and the wellness of the class. We have had far fewer injuries. We've had far better results and a planned approach for PT for the class, along with and their ability to get through the training that we asked them to come through, not just from the outset with the entrance testing, as we've done before. We used to have Cooper as our PT entrance test. We've modified that. We've learned. We've decided not to walk in straight lines anymore. We figured out that, hey, this really is benefit to the class. Not only is it from a PT standpoint, it's also from a wellness standpoint. We're asking them to take on board Fit for Life, and that the recognition that the career path they've chosen is not an easy one. And we want them to be able to be police officers for as long as they would like to continue to be police officers. So to make sure that they're fit and they're healthy, both from a mental health standpoint, along from nutrition and PT standpoint, is hugely important. Up to and including conversation I was with San Francisco PD recently, who is embedding at least 2 athletic trainers with their departments in recognition that they have some training deficiencies that they also have seen O2X be able to mitigate for them. So it's a game changer for us in a lot of respects, not just defensibility, but also the amount of money that agencies are putting forward to get people through this program. If you add on top of that liability in the event someone should become injured and then not able to participate in the program and not be able to finish what they should, it just extends that for everyone. So this has been a huge benefit for us. The other part that the executive director asked was an update on the 120th full-time basic class. That's 120th. So, yeah. So the 120 currently has 31 members. We had originally 33 assigned. We are down to 31 as of the end of week 1. We have maintained and kept everybody else since, which is huge for us. Normally we have an attrition rate of 1 or 2 by now. We have not. Everybody is still with us, so we are grateful for that. They are now knee deep into use of force training. Every Wednesday, they are in the midst of criminal law training, motor vehicle law training, and all the major blocks of instruction, the heavy academics that we expect them to, by week 12, be able to accomplish their final exams with. After week 12, there's still more training. It's going to be great. They've got an additional 4 more weeks that we're going to ask them to participate in scenarios that will actually test in a safe environment, their ability to handle the kinds of calls that Vermont officers are going to have in the streets.
Thank you, sir. Next up on my update, just for council members. So this is takes a little bit of history for folks to know, but I've had a request from an agency head for an extended scope of practice. And as everybody knows, there's 3 levels of certification: level 1, level 2, and level 3. Level 1 is still in process. Level 2 is looking to expand a little bit next year. Level 3, for folks that aren't familiar with it, is the full-time certification for a full-time law enforcement officer. Level 2 is what formerly used to be part-time law enforcement officers. Level 2 has an outlined scope of practice of what they can and what they can't enforce. And for the sake of clarity, it's essentially a level 2 officer cannot investigate felony crimes. It's beyond their scope of practice. This request that I have had was for someone to have an extended scope of practice outside of level 2, which would be investigating felony crimes related to SIU investigations, so sexual investigative units that do, child abuse and sexual crimes. I have a lot of concerns about that, but that said, there is existing in statute a piece where even within the level 2 scope of practice, it allows for a law enforcement officer that says may also practice in additional areas approved in writing by the council based on a special certification approved by the council. There is no approval process as of this moment for that approval process. Also in our rules, we also have language that allows for the council to establish one or more committees and adopt procedures and guidance documents setting forth the specialized training standards and certification requirements for certain types of investigations, and then the rule lists such as death investigation and internal affairs investigations, neither of which are a certification course. That said, level 2E that they were asking for was a practice that this former council had in place when the scope of practice became law. Because as you can imagine, there were a lot of part-time officers that then existed that had been doing all types of investigations for the entire time that they had been working. And now all of a sudden they were bound by a scope of practice that limited what they could and couldn't do. So the council created a process called level 2E, which stood for expanded scope of practice. And what those part-time officers at that time had to do was demonstrate to the council through letters of recommendation, work product, time of service that they had on, that they were capable, and their additional training, that they were capable of investigating and having that expanded scope of practice. If the executive director at the time felt that they had demonstrated that, he would make a recommendation to the council, and then the council would approve or not. That process sunsetted by council vote in 2019. That process was set up so that those that were already in the field had a process by which they could still continue to work, and then it was sunsetted. So that process hasn't been in existence since 2019. However, the statute allows for that process to still happen. So hence I have a request. So we're talking about someone that has a very limited scope of practice and time on duty, but depending upon the person who's looking for that extended scope or that specialized certification by the council, it might be somebody that has the necessary requirements or the experience or the wherewithal to do what this special request is. So I only bring this up for the council's information because we've had some in-house discussion about what would that council process look like? What committees would we put that through? And it would likely be the TAC committee for review once we had the recommendations. I did respond to this agency head saying, although this council does not have this process anymore, if we were to entertain it, here's some of the criteria that I would be looking for. And I gave very specific things that I would want to see if we were going to have somebody have an extended specialized certification to investigate sexual abuse crimes. And therefore, that would also be a process that would come through me. And if I declined it, then they could appeal it to the full council. So I'm just enlightening you about that. That might be a future discussion that we might have. And we have a lot of folks in this room that have special expertise on, investigations, sexual assault, trauma. And so that's where I would want the council to be weighing in on that as well. So that's really just an update for you to be aware of. And then moving on to my third, which I will make this brief as well. I would just be remiss if I didn't leave out a little update on our fair and impartial policing policy that you're going to hear a report out on a little bit later in this meeting. As everyone knows here, the council's policy, the fair and impartial policing policy, was voted out after almost a 2-year process to get to where we were in 2024. We have that council policy on our website. It's also thanks to the Office of Racial Equity translated into 13 different languages, including a American Sign Language video, so that it's accessible to as many people as we have. The online mandatory training for fair and impartial policing for law enforcement is due this year. It's every odd year that law enforcement has mandatory fair and impartial policing training. We are at right now 1,014 certified officers that have completed, so roughly 70% of law enforcement statewide has completed the training. They have until the end of December to do that. Also, just that, we recognize that there's some public dissent out there about our policy, and I just want to assure council members and audience members that this was a long, arduous process that had everybody's voice at the table. It was vetted by our in-house counsel as well as the Attorney General's office and found to be in compliance with federal law. So I will leave it at that, and you'll hear more about that review process a little bit later. And that's my update for you, Chair.
Thank you, Director Burkell. Do we have any questions for the director? There was quite a bit there and a number of areas. Sure. More to follow.
I could ask them. The press has reported that we are being sued. Has there been litigation filed? And if so, is the Attorney General handling that, or?
We have not received any filing paperwork.
Thank you, Chair. Chris, early on, when I first learned of O2X, there was some very impressive charts and graphs and verbiage given to us that showed great improvements on what's happening here at the Academy. The question was brought up, is there an avenue for having O2X continue on for X number of years to find out if it really happened in real life? Once the recruits leave here, do they all fall off the table, or do we keep track of that?
Is there an avenue if we continue to contract or funded to do that? Absolutely.
Have you had those
short of that, it's really a voluntary connection from officers once they're certified and they go out in the field, for us to kind of keep tabs with them and see where they are. There's no reporting mechanism. There's no way for us to monitor their health or know if they've been injured. There's no mandatory reporting mechanism for agencies to let us know how recruits are doing. We do check the states. We do a safety report every year where we've got workman's comp stats that are looked at in the profession. But that's really our goal, is to, aside from an overall officer wellness and keeping people in the profession, it's really making sure that we're at the same time, training to the best standards that we can and reducing the potential for injury while they're out on the job.
So will we be hearing any more about continued monitoring, or is it just the way it is?
You may. I don't have any concrete answers for you on that question.
Thanks.
Ken.
So in part, to answer that, every recruit that comes through right now goes through an in-body assessment at the very beginning of the program. They have the O2X an app which they are maintaining after they leave here. The O2X will coordinate with them free of charge at this point, because of the contract that they currently have with us, be able to report back on where they're at, both physically, and if they have any other issues that can be added to that app in a confidential way. So there is the possibility going forward that they will be able to continue, or the agencies will be able to continue, or we will be able to see how they progress in the next 10, 15, 20 years from a PPC standpoint and a wellness standpoint. That's, again, part of that contract that's been really valuable to us, but more importantly to the students, and hopefully to the agencies that are getting back at the end. Thanks.
Thank you.
Any further questions?
Chair, if I could just make a comment. I can't resist the temptation to express myself when I feel so strongly about this, about the O2X contract, you know. I think it's a really important investment that we're making in the long-term well-being of the people that choose to work in this profession. And I appreciate your question, Butch, because I think that it does bear taking a longitudinal look at the impact of this kind of approach to well-being, health and well-being in a profession. I'm not part of the profession, but I understand that it's very physically and mentally taxing profession. And so I've been impressed with O2X. I've been impressed with the work that they're doing, not only around the physical aspects of this job, but also talking about the mental health of people who do this job, as well as nutritional health. So I appreciate that you're doing all you can to make sure that we can continue to contract with O2X. I appreciate the creativity and the partnership that we see between the Academy and O2X, and the possibility of future enriched cooperation between agencies and the BPA and O2X.
Yeah, I appreciate your comments, Karen. There's, you know, the sad reality is once folks leave here, and a lot of agencies do have continued PT programs, and they monitor and assist their folks in wellness programs, but this is the place where you started, right? And this is where you get that mindset of your overall wellness for their entire career that you have. So if we can set those kind of guidelines in place for them right at the beginning, we're starting them off on a good path. And, you know, when I say expensive to us, the initial contract was for the first two classes was $200,000. In the big scheme of things, that's not a lot of money when you're talking the overall workers' comp claims, you know, statewide. And I think it's a wise investment, basically where we're going. So we will, it'll be a budgetary ask. We just recognize that, you know, budgets are what they are, and everybody's got certain things that they feel that are necessary, and only so many dollars to go around. So we'll keep asking where we feel it's appropriate.
Okay. Yes, sir. Good morning. The question I have, Kareem Chapman, the question I had was around community engagement. What is, or if there's any vision around community engagement? A lot of times we don't see folks show up at these meetings online, and I see a lot of that since I've been on the council. So where are we in community engagement and getting the word out what we do here?
Well, all of our meetings are public, right? Except for, well, they are public to our professional regulation meetings, which seem to garner a lot of interest. We've done a lot of work with Lisa, who is our inclusion director, who's really started to engage us in a more, I want to say regionally first, because she does have a lot of connections within the Rutland County area. And so we've, you know, partnered with a few groups already. We got one this coming Saturday with the Vermont Network that we're going to be partnering with. So Lisa's a great asset for us. I don't want to bring this piece up yet because I haven't even mentioned it to other members, but I have a meeting I'll be going to in Bennington in October for the select board that has requested some information on the professional regulation subcommittee and that process and the responsibilities of their agency head and their select board. So I'm going to be doing that. You know, you have to be here a day to really see what this place is like. I know that sounds kind of odd, but we go from thing to thing to thing all day long. And so this is like a break in a day. Not to say that, you know, planning out community engagement isn't an important piece of that. You've brought that up a couple of times already, especially around the professional regulation subcommittee and the work that they do. So we'll be looking, you know, for those events continually, and where do they fit in? Where can we send people to promote the work that we're doing here? And for folks just to understand what it is that we actually do here, because a lot of people have no idea. And some council members who have come here before or come to graduation say, wow, like I didn't realize that all this happened here. So one of the reasons that we try to at least have one in-person meeting a year. And, you know, I'm thankful to everybody that's been here today, and we'll hopefully get a chance to see what goes on during the day today. Especially you, because you're the guy that works night and day. So I appreciate you being here.
I'm that guy. Thank you. Appreciate that.
Yeah, I think, Kareem, to your question, just my observation over the last year, there's been a number of, as the directors pointed out, events, activities, and I'm thinking, we had a naturalization ceremony here at the academy, brought a lot of folks in. There's also the challenge too, because there's a core group, there's statutory representation on the council, but we do have fairly regular change. So it's not, even though there are terms, folks retire, move off, representatives change from time to time. But I think we always have to have a quorum. We have a meeting, so we hit our quorums and beyond. It is difficult to get everybody all of the time, but we are a 24-member council and do have I don't know, maybe 3/4 continuity, but there is some change that occurs, and it's just the ability to get folks in. And I think as we've been working on solidifying, changing, assessing the committee structure, that's another way to get that word out and to get engagement, not just by the council members, but we've been pretty good by necessity, have to have expertise from outside the council participate in those committees. So there's a lot going on, but it's an ongoing point, and we'll rely on you to.
There are a lot of community members who really want to be involved in this work, and they need the avenue and the space to do it. So I think we can get it done.
Yeah.
Okay. Great.
I appreciate the question, and it is one of those things that, like, when opportunities arise, we certainly take advantage of them every time that we can. I think, part of what the chair said is, like, there are some folks that I think that look at this council and say 24-person council, that's just unruly, right? Like, how do you wrangle that many people together? And yet we always got the forum, and this council is required to meet quarterly, and we meet once a month. Actually, I shouldn't say that. We have 2 meetings a month, one set for hearings, for professional regulation, and then one for regular council meetings. So this is an active and busy body. And what I thought would be real unruly has really turned into a lot of communication from outside partners that feel like they have a voice and raise their voice when they're here, which is great, because before it was a lot of, all law enforcement and different branches of law enforcement and those connected very closely to law enforcement. And while the public could still attend, there wasn't that mindset of a broader community. And that's clearly what it is now. And we've got members of this 24-person council that are involved in all kinds of committees. So it's a good process. It's working well so far. Busy, but busy.
Okay.
Sorry, I just wanted to draw attention to Lisa and the work that she's doing. She's brought a lot, especially the last few months, as far as that community engagement piece. And I didn't know she wanted to.
We could give Lisa a voice like she doesn't have one.
Sorry, Lisa.
Don't be shy, Lisa.
Chair discussed one of our biggest events that we had, which was the naturalization ceremony, which was pretty amazing and pretty important for us to do and hold that space for folks being naturalized after years and lots of studying and going through the process. And we just had a meeting yesterday about finding a date and time for 2026 to hold another ceremony. But we've also done some more like regional events, mostly Rutland County because of proximity, but we participated in National Night Out in Rutland City. We participated in the Pride Festival for Rutland County. And then this weekend, we will be at the Stomping Out Stigma in Rutland City. That's through the Turning Point Center. So I think it's important for us all to be really visible, and exactly like Chief was talking about, people need to understand what we do. We're the academy, and we often get confused as an actual law enforcement agency, but we're not. We do all the training and certification. So it's important for us to tell people our vision and our values and really get out there and bring people here. And I'm so grateful for Keisha and all the guests today for coming here, and we hope to do more of these events soon.
Thank you.
Thank you. Moving along on the agenda, we'll move to the entrance test working group update. We do have an item that we do need to act on, so I will turn the floor over to Colonel Stedman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I hope I'm not taking too great an advantage of being on the agenda, but I just want to build off a little bit of what Lisa said and thank the representatives and the senators for being here. I've been in this profession since 2000, and as I move towards the end of my career and interact with regional and national counterparts, I've become more and more convinced that Vermont can always make improvements, but we do a really good job in law enforcement officers and the police officers, the sheriffs, the troopers, and this place does amazing work with very limited resources. So I just want to give them a shout out. So thank you. As far as the entrance test working group goes, just so bring everybody up to speed, the group originally consisted of myself, it does consist of myself, Sheriff Roger Marcoux, and Captain Steve Coote from VSP, although he, I believe, is going to be stepping down and a new person from VSP will be taking his place, but that hasn't happened yet. So for right now, it's Captain Coote. There was also additional members of Wilda White, who is a consultant for VSP, and also Chief Murad from Burlington, who is no longer the chief there. I have reached out to the current chief of Burlington PD, who is also the chair of the Vermont Chiefs Association, asking for a new representative for that group on the working group. The group has, since I've been around, we've sort of moved in a bunch of different directions, but we established an entrance requirement of the 40th percentile for the rower and the run. And this is a cumulative percentile, not an individual percentile. So basically what that means is you can do really well in one and not so well in the other. And as long as you meet the 40th collectively, then you are able to basically pass what was considered the necessary requirements for the academy. In our last meeting, we had testimony from Jason Polakowski. Thank you, Polakowski, who is from O2X, as well as the deputy director, that they are seeing a need for an increase in the percentile. Basically, that recruits are still struggling to meet requirements. There's a lot of effort being expended to bring them up to a place where they are not necessarily a danger to themselves in terms of the physical requirements of the PG program, as well as the physical, the physical requirements of the training that takes place, the actual scenarios and that sort of stuff. So their recommendation, or based on their recommendation, the working group unanimously approved moving to the 50th percentile cumulative. So it still is not individual. It's based on the results of the two. So that was what we settled on. So I don't know if there's anything else you want me to say, but that was it in the night.
I think we'll open the floor up to any discussion about that recommendation, and then we can move to a motion if you'd like to move to adopt the 50th percentile recommendation.
Sure, and if that's
50th percentile. So let's get a motion on the floor. We'll open it up for discussion.
I would just say that there may be a friendly amendment to that motion. I think that conversation at the meeting was, as you just stated, the 50th percentile, but also. Oh, yes, thank you. You're right. I apologize. I forgot. Yes. And so in addition to
the timeout.
yes, thank you. I needed to have my memory jogged. Thank you. So it is the 50th percentile for the full-time academy, the full-time recruit class. Currently, the part-time level 2 is at the 40th percentile, and the recommendation was to leave that at the 40th percentile based on the request of Sheriff Marcoux specifically for further discussions to be had around the level 2 and the requirements around level 2 and sort of what the needs are there. So the motion would be for thank you. The motion would be for the 50th percentile for the full-time level 3 going forward, and for the 40th to continue for the level 2 with further discussions to be had on what may or may not need to come for level 2 as that is discussed.
Yeah, I think we'll move with the motion to increase the percentile for the level 3 only, minutes will reflect that level 2 will remain the same. You don't want to confound too many.
However, the best way to do that is,
In one motion,
Point of clarity, Chair,
level 2 only,
the level, in the minutes, the level two,
or level 3.
will indicate that that it will remain at the 40th percentile.
that's a recommendation.
That's upon further discussion.
Yes, yeah.
So it's not a permanent. I just don't want to make sure that.
No,
minutes
no,
reflect that there's some kind of decision around that.
Right.
no, there was the desire to have more conversation about level 2 than the meeting allowed for, especially in trying to get ready for this meeting.
Makes sense. Thank you.
Chief,
I mean, would that take place this next academy class coming up? Is that the idea?
That is my understanding that if this group votes this in, then the 50th will be the entrance requirement for the 121. I get that right.
right, so we're in progress on the 120.
Right, so I can add. That test.
Okay. So shall we restate the motion so we all clearly?
So the motion would be for level 3 only to move from the 40th percentile cumulative to the 50th percentile cumulative for entrance to the police academy.
And I may add effective with the 121st guys. So that we're clear about that. And we'll be sure the minutes reflect Vice Chair's comment about clarity. Okay, so we have a motion, Colonel Stedman. You have a second to that.
Also,
Jeanette seconds the motion. Any further discussion? Let's
Colonel, could you kind of fill us in a little bit on what the various components are?
sure. Oh, yes, thank you. I'm sorry. I should have done that.
50%.
Absolutely. So right now, as the deputy director said, back when I went through, it was the Cooper standard and all that. That's now long since been replaced. So it's a row, which is on the machine. I'm not going to remember the name. Thank you. Concept 2 rower, which are made right here in Vermont. And so in the row, I'm not going to get the exact distance right. There's a certain distance and a certain time that has to be achieved on the rower. Again, this will be at the 50th percentile base, and it's all done based on age and stuff. And then there's also a 1.5 mile long, which is also going to be at the 50th percentile. That's it. That's it. Yeah.
Those
And those
two
two, yeah,
are combined. So if you are not doing well in one, you may do better in another, and that combined score will give you there's a chart based on age and deputy director. Go right ahead.
So, way to hang me out to dry and not give me the whole. I know better.
I'll let you know. So we've got it combined, back in 2021. We had gone from the 2,000 meter row to the combined 2022 to the row and the line, each of which have separate components. When we say percentile, we are talking about percentile of population that's been tested before. So when we're talking about reaching the 50th percentile, that means you are exactly at 1/2 the percent of people that have been tested reach that goal. Not a very high standard, particularly when we're talking about combined. So what we've seen is a lot of folks that will be able to pass at the 40th percentile combined, but that means there's a lot of walking on the running portion. And if they're successful in the rowing portion, they can smoke the row going very quickly. It's only 500 meters and still be successful in it. Our job, obviously, is when they're in the graduating standard, which is, by the way, 50th percentile to get through the program. Our concern is making sure that they have both the cardio and the strength ability to get through these force testing scenarios and all of the stuff that we do with the academy, given what the academy program looks like. We've been very fortunate in that Jason at 2X is able to group folks in different categories based on how they're performing and get them to a different level by the time they start to the time they end. So we've been very lucky with that. In the event that we're not so successful, or if we're not able to re-engage with the contract folks as we move forward, it's going to be exciting to figure out how we are going to be able to continue to work with those dynamic groups to get them from that point A to the point B, where we all expect them to be as they actually hit the streets.
So for right now, this is literally part of the plan that we originally adopted with the intercessor group back in the day to up that percentile moving forward to make sure that we are doing what we can to make sure they're ready.
And just one thing to add to that. So this is based on Texas DPS's system that they are trying to, they've been very free and sort of rolling out around the country. Just for sort of a I don't know what the right comparison. Texas DPS is 75th percentile individual, not combined. So you have to score 75th percentile on the run and 75th percentile on the row. So, and that's their baseline for entrance to their academy. So this is considerably less of a standard. And that was on their recommendation. We met extensively with Texas DPS, who I cannot say enough good things about. They were fantastic with their time. They were willing to come. I think they did come here. They were great people to work with, and they recommended this sort of a process. I think we thought it would go more quickly than it has in terms of upping the percentages. But they said start at a place that you're comfortable with, and then work to where you're finding successful and healthy, and being able to get through the academy without injury and all that sort of stuff is sort of what their recommendation was. So, just for comparison.
There's a question in the back.
Do you have any data on how many of the candidates are washed out because they can't pass the PT portion?
I don't have specific numbers, but I can tell you is that over the course of 1 year, you're losing and COVID, in the PT test 5, maybe, throughout the entire year that aren't successful at passing 40% without for the.
And prior to you implementing the new programs, was it much?
All that said. So before this, we had what we call the Cooper Standard, and Cooper Standard required bench press, max push-ups, max sit-ups, and it's not half run. And that all had, each of those iterations had to be at 30 percentile. So we have come very far away from that. This is fairness to go to that. We are at a far lower standard.
I also think that this is for folks to gather this in the big picture, right? This is part of understanding that law enforcement has a dire need to get people into the profession, and balancing that with what they're required to do when they come here to the academy so that they don't get injured and that they're able to compete with what they need to do when they have things like use of force training, scenarios that they're going through. And I think the other thing that's kind of really critical is that this recommendation from Texas was to steadily increase that rate. And with O2X, they have developed for us a pre-workout that we've submitted to all chiefs and sheriffs ahead of time so that they can give these to potential applicants that are coming to their agency. Here's what you need to do to prepare to get ready for the academy experience. I hate to say that we have even had one in this latest class that is in here that said they didn't do anything to prepare. They weren't aware of this. Now, I don't know how they can't be aware of it, but that's on the recruit coming in, right? There's a certain level of responsibility. If this is what you want to get into this profession, there are certain things that you need to do to get there. So we're taking every opportunity to put that information out there to get people as ready as they can before they get here. And we still see struggles with recruits as they come to us. So moving up from the 40th percentile is not going to be a big leap to the 50th percentile for folks to make. And if there are folks that aren't making it at the 50th, that's still I don't want to say low bar, but it's a high bar. Yeah, it's not a high bar.
I have a quick question while we're in discussion. So here we talk about the physical aspects of our officers and the need for that, but I'm feeling compelled to ask a question about brain health. Have we ever considered testing of the brain? Imaging that can show the healthiness of a person, decision-making, different concepts. So just throwing it out there, not trying to make it complicated, but I think it's really important to understand the brain as well. Making split decisions, trauma that comes with, history and experience. I think that plays a role. We hear a lot of cases where folks made really bad decisions in the split second and they regret it later. So if we're not talking about brain health, I think we should.
Well, and to your point, right, so part of our new entrance test does have a critical decision-making process in there that it measures, but we also have to keep in mind that we, as the academy, take who agencies send us. And agencies also go to extreme lengths to make sure that they're screening their people before they get in. They're doing the polygraph, they're doing a background, they're doing, their own cognitive tests on the recruits that are coming to them. So if they meet the agency standard, that's who we take. And that it's a standard that an agency requires before they come here. So they're capable of coming to the training. Will some still struggle? Sure, there will be. We have less and less, but we still have some people that come here on day one and they're like, yeah, this isn't what I thought it was going to be. Like this profession isn't for me. And they haven't even experienced any of it yet. So, the background that agencies do is entirely critical to the folks that we get coming in here. And then it's up to us to make sure that, their decision-making, their moral character, all of that is following that discipline process to make sure that we're putting folks out there that have the wherewithal to do the job and make tough decisions. Your point's well taken.
Yes. Okay, Chair Anderson.
Couple questions. Just, I think a foundational statement is that the position of the council in 21 was that physical fitness testing is designed for the purpose of accomplishing training at the academy. Is that still the basis that the entrance testing committee is at? Was this looked at through that lens, I guess is my question.
I think that's where the discussion around the level 2 came up in Sheriff Marcoux's input. So
but just
it wasn't deemed that way, but I think, yes, I would say generally speaking, yes.
My understanding is Texas DPS is offering push-ups, sit-ups, or crunches, some form of abdominal testing, in addition to the 1.5 mile run, which is fairly similar to what the Cooper standard used to be. My understanding was that the Cooper standard fell by the wayside due to lack of support from whoever the Cooper industry is. I recall following the council adopting the rowing standard, there was acknowledged difficulties, which I'll defer what those are, but around people being able to perform academy training. So I guess my question is, you used to have a standard that worked. We moved to rowing with the belief it would do something better. The reflection from academy staff was it didn't do anything better. And now Texas DPS is saying they'll support their physical fitness test, which was similar to what we used to have and what we used to understand. Have we gone in a circle to say the push-ups, sit-ups, and running might actually be something we want to consider again, or are we just ignoring this to go with it?
Well, I think, and well, if you want to jump in, Phil, I think what we need to do is build the percentage or increase the percentages where it need to get.
So, yes. Phil, I apologize. The push-ups, sit-ups, bench press, and 1.5 mile run were a far better tool for us to use to determine whether or not someone's going to be successful in the program at the 40th percentile of Cooper standards back in the day. Cooper decided to fold up shop and to no longer defend their program. They had a lot of disparity issues between what they were saying were their normative standards, and then nationally, they didn't hold up. So they stopped. And when they stopped, we said, oh, okay, we're going to take a look at ours again and ensure that we are not part of that group. So they suggested, because they still have a health and wellness separate commission, the 2,000 meter row. We prefer the push-ups, the sit-ups, the 1.5 mile run, bench, absolutely all day long. I want to know that a recruit can push somebody half their weight off themselves in the middle of a fight, downtown, wherever it is. I think that's a useful standard to be able to dictate. Yeah, that makes sense to me. The 1.5 mile run and the row, at least that gives us some baseline for cardio and for endurance strength moving forward. And once we have that, we can continue to expand upon that with O2X and their program to build on what we already have. The issue that we had back in the day was we didn't have O2X. So to build upon that program was really us working with a trainer who gave us a series of drugs and said, here, do this program with PT. Cool. We didn't have a PT professional on staff to really make sure that that was working the way it should. This has actually turned into something that's
problem with defense of all of those facts. Go back to that and say, hey, this is what we're looking at for standard. Does it make sense? Does it not? Right now, what they're saying is, no, right now, that entry standard is below what it probably should be. So taking that recommendation as the point for.
But is it fair to say that the run and the row will primarily test cardiovascular health? I mean, I don't see how a 500-meter row is going to do nearly as much on abdominal strength or upper body strength.
And you're right, it's not designed to test abdominal, it's endurance.
But this is an entry test, which a lot of the physical training that the academy has includes upper body strength requirements and abdominal strength. So how are we testing that if we increase the standard?
So this is a baseline standard, which we're saying this person is generally accepted to be able to reach the minimum of what we need them to be able to start a program that will get them to the finish line.
Are we creating barriers for people to join the profession by increasing a cardiovascular standard that does not increase a physical upper body strength standard or abdominal strength standard? And is there an opportunity to find someone who will provide us that liability net?
Sorry, I just wanted to say, so when the conversation first started, a lot of it, as the director said, was based around trying to get people into the profession and making sure there's equity within that. And there's a lot of conversation around gender and equity, especially when the testing, as it begins, is just male, female, like doesn't take into account other areas. So as part of that, that row run combined was a way to bring in the people who may not be able to be at that standard, and make sure that if they're in strength somewhere, they may have a weakness somewhere, but it can balance out. So Texas DPS, when they first started all of this, they started at the 10th percentile. So they've built up, and I'm not sure about the addition. I haven't looked at this year where they were. I think for the troopers, they're up to like 90%. So over a period of time, they've been consulting with FBI, they've been consulting with everybody, and they have their own wellness institute. So off the recommendation with them, taking into account equity and taking into account what we're trying to do at the academy level. So what an agency wants to do above and beyond, I think can vary depending on the agency needs. But what we're trying to do at the academy and getting them in here and then making sure we have a program that's developed that can build them up to where they need to be when they leave is really what we're focused on. So it's not, right now, we're not focusing on that physical, like push-up, sit-up portion, but with the elevation of this, some of that comes with it. So we might not add in the push-up, sit-up right now, but it's not something that could be evaluated in the future of what we want to add in, depending on what data we receive from O2X.
Karen, you hit your hand.
I did have my hand up. I'm reminded my horoscope today said, be gentle with your words. I wonder if this conversation is a conversation that actually happened in the subcommittee in your work. And if this is a conversation that Sheriff Anderson should be directing to the subcommittee rather than
Right.
point of making a decision about this. So
Right, the robustness of the, whether that's a how good of a proxy that measure is for future success. So with that in mind, the chair will call the question. Vice Chair. We'll move to our hybrid vote. So relying on you, Justin, the motion
is for the entrance requirement for level 3 to go from the 40th percentile cumulative to the 50th percentile cumulative, with the minutes reflecting that level 2 will be discussed with
and effective
121st class. Forgot that again.
Okay. So all those in favor of the motion signify by raising your hand for those present. And the roll call.
Daniel Garrett. And Glenn Boyd.
Aye.
The motion has passed. Thank you, Colonel Stedman. Plenty of issues raised in the minutes. I think this will be continuing to be an ongoing issue. And the executive director's comments on the balance. We're always balancing recruitment, accessibility, performance. These are all, it's a dynamic equation, right? It's a dynamic equation. So we'll continue to discuss it, I'm sure. Moving to the next item on the agenda, we have an update from the FIP committee on the review process. And so I'm going to turn it over to Lisa. You're here, but we have Daniel, and I don't know if Kevin is online as well. I'll turn it over to you, Lisa, since you're here and you can go.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Yes, Daniel and Kim are on the screen, and I'm actually going to pass it over to Daniel to give a brief update on the review process, and I'm happy to answer any questions after.
Excellent. Thank you, Lisa. On August 11th, the FIP subcommittee met with HRC and AGO. The FIP policy review is conducted in consultation with both offices, and accordingly, they were instrumental in the last FIP policy review and the updates made to the policy in 2024. Neither HRC or AGO had any major critiques or recommendations for the FIP policy at present. Both entities did raise some interesting questions and provided feedback for the subcommittee to consider for future iterations of the FIP policy. We will present their comments in the subcommittee's report, which will be compiled after we hear additional feedback at the next week's subcommittee's meeting and after the subcommittee has had an opportunity to discuss all feedback gathered. Consequently, we don't anticipate any substantive changes to the FIP policy based on the feedback provided by AGO and HRC. We are preparing for our next meeting on September 8th, when we will receive feedback from community members and law enforcement. Thank you.
Yeah, I just want to reiterate that this coming Monday, September 8th, we have a public meeting where everybody will be receiving feedback and thoughts on the FIP policy as it stands from both law enforcement and community members. So expect it to be a pretty full meeting. It starts at 11 and you can find the link online on our website. But if we're interested in joining, please do. And if you have other comments that you'd like to submit, you can send them to me directly to my email.
Thank you, Lisa. Butch.
Thank you. An ask of Lisa. We've fallen into the acronym trap where we are talking in acronyms. And for us on the council, many of us understand what you're talking about. Not all of us. Do you explain it a little bit for our guests?
FIP is, we're referring to fair and impartial. That's the policy we are talking about that's in review for this next year.
And just for Daniel's acronym, when he refers to the AGO, he was referring to the Attorney General's office, and the HRC with the Human Rights Commission.
Yes, thank you for pointing that out. And I also like to just comment, we talked about this at several meetings back, a number of meetings back, laying out the schedule. So I think we're appreciative of the committee having a diligent schedule and process to solicit feedback to move us toward review deadline for 26. So for any revisions to that policy. So just to assure that we are on a diligent process of soliciting a wide range of feedback to go into that next revision discussion, if any. So, okay. There are no further items in regards to that. Thank you for that update. I'm going to move next to the DRE assessment.
We're going to have Jamie do a quick intro to that assessment, and then John Flanagan will deliver the assessment for you.
And we'll start by explaining what DRE is.
Another one.
The DRE is the drug recognition experts that we have at the state, 49 of them right now. And so they are part of law enforcement. They deal with the They were all trained through the program that they have to go there. So they're all law enforcement officers and they get called out when someone, an officer believes that drugs are involved in. Okay. So good morning, I'm Jamie. I am the impaired driving training coordinator. So I handle our $500,000 grant through NHTSA, National Highway Traffic Safety Administration. If I use any acronyms, please feel free to say, hey, what does that mean? So basically in 2022 and 2023, Vermont's data on impaired driving related fatalities and serious injuries spiked. Vermont was considered a low range state for impaired driving until this year. For federal fiscal year 26, we will be considered a mid-range state. Our impaired driving fatalities increased to 65% in 2020. Of the 65%, 76% of those, or 31 crashes, involved an operator suspected to be under the influence of drugs or alcohol and drugs. But only 10%, and I shouldn't say only, but 10 of those crashes involved only alcohol. So drug impairment has steadily increased, so much so that we have had 0 fatal crashes involving impaired driver. So this information just highlights for you how important it is for our officers to be educated and trained in DUI enforcement. Every traffic stop is a potential DUI arrest, and every DUI arrest is a potential lapse. I don't say that in jest. It's very, very. So in 2023, when NHTSA offered out to all of the states this an assessment of highway safety program assessment of the drug enforcement classification program, we were ready to volunteer for it. It's a completely voluntary assessment, and we said, yes, this is what we want to do. So throughout the past year, I've been in constant communication with NHTSA, and we organized and conducted this assessment in June. All of our impaired driving programs were assessed. So the DUI detection, the advanced roadside and impaired driving enforcement, or ARIDE, that the council is very familiar with based on this. And the drug recognition excellence. So the first portion of it was an Excel spreadsheet that went out, and various stakeholders had input into the program and into the questions that the assessors had. And then the second portion of the assessment, we had national experts come out here into this room, actually, and we had a panelist of people who were interviewed by them for this. Those members were from the State Highway Safety Office, the Vermont Forensic Laboratory, the Traffic Safety Resource Prosecutors, myself, our directors, and the Drug Enforcement Classification Program State Coordinator. So we received the final report in July, which was a result of this year-long process. There were many recommendations and commendations in that report. I hope you've been able to take the time to read it, or that you will be able to read it and see how you can make an impact in impaired driving and supporting these programs. I'll turn it over to John to review those recommendations and commendations. But first, I just want to thank you for your continued support to these programs. It takes a community to have an everlasting impact in preventing impaired driving, and every one of you are part of that.
If there it is. It's online. Okay, we're online.
All
Floor
right.
is yours.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Jamie, for that introduction as well. And it's an honor to be here with the council this morning, and good morning all. I see a lot of familiar faces and other names online. That I spent 28 years with Vermont State Police, retiring in 2019 as the commander of our traffic unit. And honored that I came back in December of 19 with the council on a contract to continue to manage Vermont's drug evaluation and classification program. Just a little bit of background. I've been directly involved with this program for over 20 years. I became one of the first drug recognition experts in Vermont in 2005 when we first stood the program up, and I continue to be involved with the International Association of Chiefs of Police. I serve on the program's technical advisory panel as the Eastern Regional Coordinator and also as the Standards Working Group Chair. Most of this work we wouldn't be able to do without the support and leadership, not only of the Academy, but strong support from our State Highway Safety Office, National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, both at the regional and national levels. They provide all the funding for these programs. Just a quick background of the program of where we are. Jamie mentioned a number. It's always a moving target. We currently have 48 certified drug recognition experts and 5 instructors with officers representing 25 agencies statewide. Our numbers are down from pre-pandemic, which I know no one's surprised. We were at 58, and we're continuing to try to build the program, offering at least 1 school per year, as well as 2 recertification trainings also per calendar year. The program conducted 381 enforcement evaluations in calendar year 24, and as of today, there has been 363 evaluations conducted so far in 2025. There also have been over 330 DRE agency requests through Vermont Alerts for suspected drug-impaired drivers to date this year. As Jamie outlined the assessment process, there were several recommendations that I will briefly summarize. In the program management area, they've recommended implementing a centralized system to collect and analyze DUI arrest, toxicology, and adjudication data from our courts. These are all data that are really siloed, and there's a need to pull these together to measure, what we're doing in this area and what kind of outcomes we have to move forward and to make adjustments as needed. This is something that's currently in the Highway Safety Office's Highway Safety Plan. So there has been funding allocated to do this project. It's in the early stages. Another program management area is to develop SFST refresher requirements. So most officers go through standardized field sobriety or DUI training initially, but there is nothing to say that they need to come back and refresh their skills. Although these recertification trainings are provided, they're completely voluntary in nature, and it's up to the individual officer or the agency if they want those officers to attend. And the problem is that we've seen, and it's not a Vermont problem, a national problem, is that officers get this training, but it's a perishable skill, and they lose proficiency sometimes within administrating and detecting or how to detect the clues doing these roadside tests. And that you can imagine that defense attorneys can have a field day if officers aren't doing these tests in the correct manner, and what those outcomes will be in those types of cases. Another area is to encourage DRE evaluations even when BAC's, blood alcohol content for alcohol, is above a 0.08 level or per se level, to identify poly use impairment. So even though somebody might be over a 0.08 and they may have suspected other substances in their system at the time of operation, if an alcohol DUI goes through without any other sort of impairment for those other drugs, any other evidence that they've had any other evidence of drug use, they're not going to be treated for that other substance abuse. They're just going to be treated for the alcohol. Consider using green labs for practical training. That already has been started and is in process. Under program operations, create a short roll call video on standardized field sobriety testing procedures for law enforcement officers. This is kind of a stopgap measure. It doesn't replace going to a refresher training. Also explore a law enforcement phlebotomy program to streamline blood sample collection and timeliness. Many states do allow law enforcement phlebotomy to take place. Vermont currently doesn't, so that is something that would require legislative approval. Increase interest in DRE applicants through recruitment of law enforcement liaisons that are embedded with the Highway Safety Office and current DREs. We currently are having a problem getting applicants, and we're putting on some small classes, much smaller than we were pre-pandemic. Also, educate law enforcement officers that drug impairment signs may be evident even when BAC exceeds the 0.08 limit. That was discussed also in the program management. Under prosecution and adjudication, expand cross-disciplinary training, mainly for prosecutors, judges, and toxicologists on DUI and DRE protocols. This also goes with reinstating a judicial outreach liaison who would be a judge, typically a retired judge, to educate and be a liaison with the judiciary to get that type of training. Encourage participation in SFST and ARIDE trainings by legal professionals to improve court understanding. Alcohol DUI cases for most prosecutors are pretty straightforward. Once you start talking about drug impairment and they're much more difficult to prove those cases. And there's much more evidence and much more specialized knowledge that prosecutors need to move those cases forward. Also provide courtroom testimony training through their traffic safety resource prosecutors and others for officers to improve their testimony for DUI case outcomes. I think we've seen that, again, since the pandemic, a lot of our newer officers don't have much experience with courtroom testimony, so there's certainly a training need there. And finally, toxicology. One of the highlights are improved data systems by integrating lab instruments and digitizing workflows, and also to implement oral fluid testing in lieu of blood testing, as it's less invasive and more timely. When the retail cannabis bill was passed a few years ago, oral fluid now is allowed as a matrix to be collected for a evidentiary sample. However, the lab isn't currently set up to provide that type of analysis at this time. So that's something that we will look at to move forward. These are recommendations. Some are probably low-hanging fruit. Others require legislation, require funding, maybe even require additional personnel. So as a group, with our steering committee, as well as internally, there'll be discussions about trying to move some of these assessments recommendations forward. I will say that the assessment team was very complimentary on the program here in Vermont. I think we're doing some really good things, and there's things that they're going to use with other states to try to implement that we're doing here. But at the end of the day, we wanted to hear what we're doing and what we can improve on to make better outcomes in these cases and make our highways safer and get people who are abusing drugs the help that they need. That's all I have to report. I think I'm under my time too.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir.
So our department meets at TSRPs, traffic safety, resource prosecutors, legislators, federally funded, no general fund dollars for the most part, a small match. Dennis Wigman's former state's attorney from Addison and Matt Dolezal, Franklin County, are two statewide traffic safety resource prosecutors. Worked with Jamie Lee. Really, I just wanted to call out Jamie Lee's work across the state is deeply appreciated. Law enforcement prosecutors both worked with her and appreciate that work, as well as with John Flanagan. The SFST refresher every 3 years, we are a big proponent of that work. As John said, the skills get stale unless you're actively in the corporate talking about it to members of the public about what you did on the road. That's how you're able to teach yourself what you know. So unless you're explaining that to members of the public on a jury, 99.5% of DUIs plead out, you're not going to be experiencing what it is to tell someone else. And if they don't understand, they won't understand what you're learning, what you're doing as an officer. Increased focus on the post-certification training in general. We're doing our best with those two traffic safety resource prosecutors. They both prosecute cases and do education. And witness preparation, like we said, the corporate work.
We need to continue to have that iterative process. We do the mock trial work, and we're going to try to have free opportunities for officers and working with our judiciary to give us like 4 or 5 days a year where we're not in the courtrooms to actually set aside time. We had one day in December where we brought some sheriff folks and some municipal officers down to Rutland in a courtroom. If you do it in a room like this, it's great, but you got to do it in a courtroom. Otherwise, it doesn't feel real to a lot of the officers. And definitely exploring with the judiciary, have to sign off on the search warrants and have to rule on evidentiary standards, et cetera. They need to be educated on these issues. And some of them were former prosecutors, defense attorneys, and they bring, just like we all do, baggage to the courtroom, but making sure that they understand the training that's happening from a neutral, objective perspective is deeply important, and we hope to work with the judiciary in getting that done. I also want to thank the lawmakers here for Act 41 this year, House and Senate Judiciary in particular, Senator Norris and Representative Lalonde. This year, we got some really important work done. Individuals who are young people who have very serious DUIs. Previously, those were not being sent to DMV. So we worked with DMV and DPS, Department of Public Safety, to ensure that if you blow like a .20 and you're adjudicated in family court, all of those get sent to DMV now. Previously, that wasn't happening. One of the greatest indicators of future drug involvement on the road is a DUI before you turn 18. And a lot of those have been wiped away and actually expunged and deleted family court, which is a rehabilitative process. But the important effect to our community is safety. So we had to ensure we were balancing family court confidentiality with getting across the finish line. So a huge improvement to our DUI law took place July 1. Another really important piece was ensuring that previously we had to charge hindering and all sorts of weird stuff when someone didn't want to respond to particularly a drug warrant. Now we have a specific refusal crime. You don't have to have previous DUI. Judges signed off on the search warrant. We have PC in terms of probable cause for the officer and the prosecutor, and someone not participating in that warrant can be a huge public safety issue. You can now charge a DUI, a rehabilitative statute, to the individual. So we're actually able to work on what it is that's the underlying issue, substance use, et cetera. So we had some really landmark work that happened this session that I wanted to call out for the council, and also thank folks who are here in the room. So thank you all very much. Many of the work, the hours of the last few years have come to fruition in getting some of these key public safety measures done. And the audit took a lot of time, but I'm so happy that that took place here in Vermont. And we even pulled a judge into it on my own. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Are there any further questions for?
Yeah, just a question of what the Dave Ryan had, heard that for some legislation that's needed, that the PSAS, would it be going to Flanagan? Who should be our point of contact to understand what the legislative needs are for the year?
Yeah. Voice value. Yeah, well, certainly the state's attorney.
Yeah, myself, John, and probably Dennis Wigmans, we could talk to you about that. Yeah, for sure.
Probably a joint interest for a few different reasons: legal versus operational versus funding.
I was, sorry, I would interject to include this.
Anything that we can be included on where we can be of assistance or know the loop that's being discussed is helpful.
Okay. Any further questions for our presenters on this?
I have a question this time. On the SFST refresher, all the investigators from Liquor and Lottery went through it last week. It had been 20 years since I took that class, and I was surprised at how much I had forgotten from it. When I worked in Burlington on patrol at night, we got a fair number of DUIs, and I was amazed at how much I had. But I had a question, John, about the oral fluid testing that you briefly mentioned there. Just as technology advances, I know I saw that at one time we were considering a litmus test, where it was literally like a tongue to paper test that showed the amount of THC in the blood. I was just in the system. I was curious where the technology is for that type of testing now.
Well, if you're for roadside testing, I mean, certainly there is technology there. It doesn't give you an amount. It's presumptive. And if someone's been around for a few years, there have been a couple of bills that have been introduced in legislation for roadside oral fluid testing. Unfortunately, they died there. I think it's something to consider. It was kind of new back then, but now a number of states have adopted that technology. You know, people call it sort of a PBT for drugs, and it doesn't test for drugs, but it does test for most of the commonly abused drugs. And you know, oral fluid isn't like urine. It's going to reflect recent usage, where urine you're going to get more historical use. So the technology has come a long way. It's got limitations, but it can be helpful. And I don't know if the state's attorneys are having some discussion about that. I've had some discussions with Dennis, you know, whether that is something that maybe they'll get a sponsor for next session to look at again.
Thank you. Yeah, next item on our agenda is some of the work on identity-based responsivity. And we have Tabitha Moore with us. I will turn it over to you.
Before we go, I'm recognizing the time. Do we need to do a quick time chat? If we need that. Another 30 minutes, a long time. I just want to make sure you break this.
It's the same.
All right, so, well, yeah, it's the same as possible, which is only a brand new model. I'll come hang out next to Executive Director Raquel. All right, Lindsay's got the slide deck going up, and I believe that I have used both full names and acronyms as we go, but I recognize that for folks that have not seen this content yet, this may seem really big and really new. This is essentially the next iteration of identity and policing. Historically, we talked about peer-to-person policing. So we'll be presenting an update. You see it says implementation. For folks on the council, it's good to be in space for those people that were here for my presentation in January. And like I said, for the newer folks, please feel free to ask questions as needed. Let me start my timer because I found that sheet that I would do as well as I could. Okay, are we good? Can everybody hear me? All right. So this is, like I said, this is this second piece. When I was here last in January, I was presenting how we did all of this, and it was a lot of science-y based stuff. So today we're going to just briefly go over the basic concept. So as a parent of 2 teenagers that live in my house, I often tell them, do the dishes, right? Load the dishwasher. And that's my expectation, right? That they will load the dishwasher. However, all 3 of us have very different ways of doing that. Some get the dishes clean, some arguably do not, right? Do you scrub first? Do the bowls go facing forward? Knives, do they go facing up or down? We don't have a lot of we don't necessarily provide all of the guidance around what that looks like, right? So we have expectations, but how do we measure the tasks and the skills? And when Dr. Clements and I met about this, and he was trying to like wrap his mind around, he's like, Tabitha, this is a great analogy. The dishwasher one, people can understand. Because we all have different ways of understanding. And so this model is a way of taking all of the ways that we understand and deal with identity across policing. One of the things that I want to note before I jump too far into it is we were kind of talking about, identity is the thing that people feel all kinds of ways about. There's not a lot I can do about people's feelings about the word identity or politicization. One of the things that we considered as we developed this was, should we be talking about protected classes? Because a lot of the identities that we're talking about, a lot of the protocols, procedures, and policies are about protected classes. But we know that police interact with more than just protected classes. Let's take an example. And this is a true story. Last year, I was walking to a restaurant with some friends. There was a very large gentleman who was potentially on some substances, maybe had some mental health issues, just calls me the N-word. Out of nowhere. Officers, is that a crime? No. Is it protected? Am I protected, or is the speech protected? Right? So when we're talking about protected classes, it's not broad enough to deal with what our officers have to deal with. So that's why we're using the term identity-based policing, because they're interacting with my identity and the harm that I faced around my identity, but there is no legal piece there. Does that make sense to folks? So the reason we don't use the term protected class in this is because policing goes beyond that. Socioeconomics and housing are not technically protected either, but we do know that there are cultures and things that happen around that. Make sense so far? Excellent. Keep it moving. So the identity-based policing model that we've developed has three basic components, and I didn't create anything new here. What I did was look at how we police, not just here in Vermont, but across the US. For those of you that don't know, my PhD is in transformative social change along the lines of identity in policing and how do we make this an easier crosswalk so that all parties feel healthy, safe, and protected. So the three pillars are fair and impartial policing, or FIP, as we've been talking about, identity responsive policing, which is kind of a newish term, and I'll get to what it means in a second, and community policing, which is or community-based policing, community-oriented policing. There's a lot of acronyms for that one as well. But there are three basic constructs related to how we police. The terms fair and impartial policing is a model that most folks are familiar with. We had Lori Friedel here, I think in 2017, as we were developing our fair and impartial policing, which is basically, we try to be fair and impartial, which means that we understand how our biases play a role and we do everything we can to mitigate them. It's essentially the not goal of the three. Don't be sexist, racist, homophobic, all of those things. Understand how that can come into play and fix it, right? Identity responsive policing are approaches that we use to recognize and respond to folks' needs along those identity-based characteristics. So, and we'll get into some examples of that in a sec. And then community policing, again, that's a national model that has so many different components and is so widely implemented. Right, and it's different even from community to community here in Vermont. So basically, this model is a container for understanding how do we do identity and policing. And then identity-based job tasks. That was good. Those of you that were here in January got a whole earful on the scientific methodology of creating identity-based job tasks. Those are the things, right? So the expectation is that we are fair and impartial, that we respond to people based on their needs, which sometimes can feel like you're in conflict, right? Like, I'm not supposed to use bias, but I'm supposed to recognize identity. How do I do that, right? I'm supposed to be connected to the community, but I'm also supposed to remain neutral. So identity-based job tasks are those tasks that are determined to be specifically related to identity. Either identity is a primary consideration in how the task is carried out. So for example, if you are using pepper spray, right? You're thinking about if the person is elderly, if they have illness, right? So those are ways that that's a task where identity is forward. And then there are tasks that are identity specific. So for example, responding to a mental health crisis. The whole reason you're in there is because of the identity-based thing that's happening. Make sense? Okay, so let's move into the model. So for those of you that were here, okay, so this is the why, right? So the whole reason, like tapping the why we need another model, we have FIP. Well, like I just said, FIP is not expansive enough to envelop the whole of identity. And we are experienced a lot around emerging identities as liberation happens for folks along a lot of areas. We're seeing and hearing more. And we want a way for officers and police departments to be able to track this and to have a through line between the expectation and what happens, right? Just like anything else in policing, you're not just gonna give somebody, a weapon and be like, oh, just go out and do your thing. We're very clear and meticulous about how we do that. What we're saying is we need to do the same thing along the lines of identity. That creates transparency and clarity for everybody involved. Strategic alignment, right? You can make sure that we are aligned with what we believe and what we say. We expect from a state level all the way down through to the department level. Operational consistency. Like I said, my three kids, two live in the house, have very different ways. And when I say clean your room, I'm going to get a whole lot, right? And we see that again in policing. Part of that is necessary. People need to have discretion. You need to have the ability to move through cultures. And what this model is designed to do is to help you do that, but also to do it in a way that is kind of uniform and consistent. And then again, that creates your legal defensibility because you have the through line between your expectation, your articulation, the tasks, your assessment, and how you're training and supporting folks in creating that. So this is a very tiny look at the model. It will be in your packets if you want to expand it, right? At the top, you see identity-based policing, which is this whole construct of how do we understand the role of police, identity and policing? What's the intersection there? And then your 3 buckets on the left, like I'm struggling to see it, so I apologize to you. Clear and impartial, identity responsive, and community. And within each bucket, you have things, you have your policies, you have your procedures, you have your programs and your practices. So taking a look at fair and impartial policing, we have a policy, right? So that's one thing that we do under that bucket. Another thing that we might do is how we respond to, how we do data collection to ensure that we are being impartial. Under identity responsive, we have all kinds of things that can happen. And again, this map, what you see here, is not the same. It won't be the same in every department. And I'm actually working with one department who was kind enough to allow me to tinker to see how long it takes to map this sort of thing from within so that they have a map of their department. And we're actually now in the process of what you'll see later, which is how do we make sure that officers are supported and know that these are the expectations? Is it an FTO? Do you have advanced trainings? Where is it in supervision and evaluation? So again, we're making that through line extremely clear. So in identity responsive, you may have your domestic violence policy, right? We're responding to that protected class. We may have, actually, I have it here too. And it's tiny. Sorry, it's so tiny. We couldn't figure out how to make it any bigger and still be able to see it. You have your hate motivated crimes procedures. And you might have guidance. There's a department that develops some guidance around how do we interact. It was a group of folks from the community that decided how do we interact along the lines of identity. And it's a really cool kind of guidance procedure that they developed. And then the third is community policing, which a lot of folks may see as more proactive approaches. Outreach programs like school resource officers would fit under community resources. Now, why would I say that a school resource officer program would be identity based? You didn't know this was going to be close, did you? Juveniles, right? The way that we interact with juveniles is very different than the way that we act, right, with adults. And so that's an example of an identity-based community policing initiative. Make sense? Okay. And then you might have other things like Lisa was talking about how this department just did National Night Out. That is community responsive. It is localized. It's intended to be about those community needs and resources. Okay. And then what's the one I have last minute? Well, there's some examples for you. How much time do I have? Oh, 10 minutes. Great. Okay. So moving on to the next slide. So that's the overall model. Again, I'm going through this fairly quickly because I presented it back in January. I do believe that the video and all of the materials that go deep into the how are available if you need them. So the results of that initial project were we developed the identity-based policing job tasks, right? So you know IADList and the work that they've been doing to align their curriculum to make it legally defensible and up to today's standards. Well, we worked alongside IADList with subject matter experts, many of whom were in this room, thank you very much, and online. And we identified that there are 193 job tasks required of Vermont's police force. And as a side note here, and Sheriff Anderson, this is a direct shout out to you. I recognize that this is mainly control activities and that our sheriffs, right, our court personnel, our game wardens, folks have other things, but these were the ones that were identified that were most closely aligned with what IADList was doing. So I do recognize that even those 193 tasks are limited of this 600 plus that Vermont's officers do. Of those, I worked with another subject matter expert group to determine which of those 193 should we be teaching in a basic level 3 academy? And they came up with 142. And then what I did was I took those 142 job tasks and I said, how am I going to train? What kind of training are we giving to officers and where do we need to create training where gaps exist? And what you're going to see is how I did that next, right? For folks who are interested, of those 193, 42 are part of the model FIP policy. Okay. And again, I went through all of that back in January. And then there's the 26 core skills that, again, the training that we developed is based on the 26 core skills and the 142 identity-based job tasks so that the way that we develop this training is in alignment with the way that IADList is developing the rest of the academies so that they can seamlessly integrate. I saw that face. So this is what I've been working on for the last 6 to 8 months is the training and evaluation piece. The first thing that I did was IADList created a really beautiful 6-ish hour 7-ish hour, between lunch and breaks, curriculum. And I know that Lisa and Mara have been trying to pilot it. It was really, it's a pretty cool curriculum they created, but it is not, the identity-based job tasks have not been identified, so it's not aligned to that. And then the second issue is that it doesn't talk about the Vermont specific FIP, kind of unique characteristics of Vermont's fair and impartial policing policy. So what I did was I developed a way too short, but if we gotta get it into the time that we have a 30 to 40-minute activity that I created that introduces Vermont's officers to our fair and impartial policing policy. So they have some opportunity to access that with instructors prior to going into the field. It is something that we can adapt to be an online thing, though it's not recommended. Again, I know that the Academy is working as hard as they can with the resources that they have, and there's a lot of content. We'll get to that. So it's basically they're looking at the policy, and then there's 3 assessment options that can be integrated in the moment as the training is happening, at the end of the week, or whatever they choose to do the assessment. And then there's also scenario options, so that the folks that are running scenario day have a rubric and assessment opportunity related to how and whether Vermont's cadets recognize the fair and impartial policing policy. Okay, so that was item 1. And then the second piece is to develop a full day training called Identities in Policing. Oh, you're good. That's exactly what needs to happen. We're thinking here. And the Identities in Policing curriculum is meant to capture everything outside the 42, which is nearly impossible to do in one-day training. And what we know is that this isn't new, right? We do know that it is happening, that there are areas that, say, constitutional law, for example, is teaching that do relate to identities in policing. What we haven't been able to do yet is to map those thoroughly with the IALIS curriculum. So that's our to-do left. But in the meantime, we did manage to capture about 110 of the remaining identities in policing, or the identity-based job tasks in this curriculum. Again, it is a full-day curriculum. It does have intensive assessment during, it has the scenarios based again, and the knowledge checks throughout. And the goal of this is to introduce people to the concept of identity. Because what we find is that many of us don't even realize that we have kind of 3 levels of identity. And that, you know, we may know that we have maybe a gendered self and that we have an able-bodied or disabled-bodied self, but we don't necessarily have the opportunity to think about what does that mean for us as we're going about our jobs. So there's a very brief introduction to that before going into some of the historical and cultural pieces related to group identities in the United States, right? And anybody who lived through the pandemic may also remember the murder of George Floyd and what that meant for policing here in Vermont. I was working diligently with the Department of Public Safety and the Academy to translate what does this mean, the way that identity intersects with policing. And there was a big gap for folks in understanding, well, wait, that didn't happen here. Why is that a problem? Or that was so long ago. So we bring that back. We did pull from the curriculum developed by Dr. Nazrena Longo, who has taught fair and impartial policing here, along with Dr. Curtis Reed for many moons. And both have looked at this and they approved. So I feel comfortable as 2 of my mentors and friends in this work. So we do maintain that part. And like I said, we have the assessment and practical learning and application pieces so that it is not just exploring who you are, but for the purpose of this work. Okay. We'll pause right there. How y'all doing? It's a lot to take in, and I know lunch is waiting for you, and it's always delicious. So what do we still need? As I said, we weren't able to fully map. We haven't been able yet to fully map throughout the ways that we are integrating those job tasks and skills, training and assessment throughout. We want to support the instructor skill and competence in teaching and assessing. Literally hot off the presses last week. The team here just received these. I'm waiting for some feedback from folks in the room who received my email. Please take a look because what you say matters and makes a difference in what we do. So that the Academy staff can then begin to familiarize themselves with it and try it, just like IALIS is kind of going through this iterative process over the next 2 or 3 years. I would recommend that you're also taking the same kind of opportunities to trial these out. And then, again, adopting the identity-based job tasks and skills into the advanced trainings, right? It's one thing when we do it in the basic, but how are the 1,000+ officers? I'm making up numbers here, I don't know. How are the people that are already in the field? We can't just take care of the people that are shiny new. We need to take care of the people that have been doing this for a really long time. As my friend Ingrid Jonas would say, what is it? Culture eats policy for lunch. Okay, so we can move on to the next slide. I think we're doing pretty good here. I mean, it's a lot. So what are my recommendations and next steps? I've just gone through a couple of them, but let's go ahead. The first is that we need to implement the trainings. Give it a test run, try, see how it feels, you know, we can look at that fair and impartial one. That's a pretty super simple, discrete lift. Whereas the identities one, that's a whole day. Hey, do you have an extra day in the academy right now?
I don't really.
We're gonna get to that recommendations, right? So the first piece is to try to implement these, to try them out with each other, with the academy staff, give it to each other, see how it feels, what clicks, what doesn't. The next one is to train the staff and trainers, right? Because though Lisa and Mara may be experts in this content, we want to make sure that all folks in the academy feel comfortable with the concepts and content and strategies here. Because especially if we're putting it throughout the academy, everybody has to have some basic skills. And then with that one, the big piece is on how do you assess. And assessing identity-based skills can be very complicated because it's very easy for our values to get in there versus like, what do we actually need to do? And then the third is the curriculum alignment. Okay, that was my 19-minute. Right, and then like I said, we want to adopt the model within the academy first. Let's try it out in the academy, see where we're teaching each of these things and how do we live this. I think the community inclusion director position is one really great example of community policing, well, community-based initiatives, for example. Okay, and we'll move on to the next one. Within police agencies, something that you can choose to do, like I said, this organization, I'm very grateful for them allowing me to come in and try this with them. They've been wonderful. But you can adopt this model within your department. And the first task of that is just mapping. What are we already doing? I think we don't necessarily know what we're doing because we feel like identity is one of those kind of amorphous things. So this is a way to concretize and say, this is how we interact with identity. These are the things that we do, and here's how we treat and ensure our officers are prepared. And then to integrate identity-based policing skills into your internal learning opportunities. So for example, FTO, how many things do we come out of the county and say, we're just gonna do that in FTO? That's FTO, leave it to FTO. And if you're an FTO, where's your guidance around that? How are you being supported to be able to assess and train officers around these topics? So as we integrate, and this is the step that I'm in with the department I'm working on, is like the integration piece. We're gonna see what they say. So when I come back, maybe next month, I'll have an answer for you about how it went with them, and maybe they'll be willing to come and speak to how the process went. And then the last one is assessment and accountabilities. This is where we have that opportunity to standardize the knowledge checks, exam, and scenario evaluations. I have yet to see an evaluation that doesn't contain something like, gets along well with others. That's not enough, right? That's such a ambiguous thing, and I don't want to see people getting knocked by ambiguous standards. I think that there's a way that we can do it so that it's, loose enough that there's discretion, but does give a little bit of container. What do we mean when we say, implements fair and impartial policing? Let's set some standards here. And then the next level is engagement and continuous improvement, right? This is, to your point, Kareem, we've got to be making sure that throughout this process, we are engaging with our community partners. It's not just an internal mapping process for the police department to do on their own. Bring in your community partners who experience it. They may see something you didn't. They may know something that you don't, right? Mapping and relating. Again, one of my favorite examples is Vermont State Police had this program. I don't know if you're still doing it. If you're not, you should. When I was the head of the NAACP in Rutland, we had a liaison with PSP, and we figured out how do we relate to each other. So how are you relating to your identity-based orgs? And that was such a helpful thing for us to strengthen our partnership and create through lines. And then the last piece, everybody's favorite, looking at you legislators, is monitoring and improvement. How are we monitoring? Like I heard some really great numbers, but 70% of folks have already done the FIP training that's due by December, right? we need monitoring and continuous improvement strategies. So we need to be collecting statewide data on implementation of the mapping and how is it affecting FTO and all of those other pieces. And then legislators, I'm so glad you're here. I'm going to speak to you for a minute, right? Not that you haven't heard this a million times, right? But there's a collaborative approach here. The council's job is to potentially vote on, do we adopt this model as a statewide thing, as a way to map how we do not just fair and impartial policing, but identity across policing. The legislature, they need money. They need time. Our academy is not long enough. And I know you've heard that a million times. I have testified a million times that it is a problem when we require more of hairdressers than we do of law enforcement. And it's not that we don't require more, because officers have incredible responsibility, but we're not giving them enough resources to meet the demand, right? We always say, to whom much is given, much should be expected. The opposite is true, right? And if we want the academy to be able to thoroughly implement this model, you got to show them something, okay? Something so that folks know, this content is about 20 hours. I've talked with Lisa. I am an expert in this field. I train this stuff all the time. This content should be about 20 hours. We currently have 7 hours, including lunch, devoted to it. If you're okay with that, then the BPA can be off the hook. And then for the academy, my favorite folks, monitor implementation progress through data collection, training, and development. It's an easy job. Yeah, I know. Okay, and then our last slide is just what questions do you have? I know that was a lot, and it was really, really quick. Yes.
I'm sorry if you said this, but is this approach being utilized anywhere else? That
the state of Vermont will be the first one to create a comprehensive umbrella under which we are actually tracking all of the things that we do, which is why the model started with, what do we do? And I know we do FIP, I know we have identity responsive, and I know we got this.
And I just
so we'll
want
be
to
the first.
And I'm wholly supportive of that, because you sort of said sheriffs and game wardens, but I have sat in on discussions with wardens who are like, well, when talking about traffic stop data and race questions, they're like, I don't know what am I, like, I don't want to do that, I'll get in trouble. Like, what if I say the wrong, like, there's so much, I don't know, stigmatism, but there's like a stigma around, like, there's so much wrapped around this identity issue that presenting it to law enforcement in the academy to get them talking about it, to break down some of the barriers of just, I mean, obviously no one should be calling you the N-word. That's not okay. But at the same time, there are people that say, I don't want to say she's a Black woman, because like, that might be and so just that discussion, to have those, to be able to say, like, I think I'm talking to you right, or, any of that. I wholly support this, and we need to have it from just the concept of, as you said, even game wardens don't know what the frick they're supposed to do. And we mostly deal with animals, which really don't. That's all.
One of the things that you might run into, right, are the indigenous laws and practices related to, right? And so then, but I think your point is really critical, and especially right now, I don't know if anybody has noticed, but our country is a little stressed out right now. And identity is a part of that. And for officers to have a place to be able to talk about that is critical from go. And I don't think we're doing enough.
Or even know how to, even know how to,
right,
even know how to approach the conversation.
Like,
right.
And do you say, what are you? Do I say, who are you? Right? There are some very basic skills that we don't have the opportunity or time. But then an officer will end up in that second hearing meeting because they did the wrong thing, they said the wrong thing, they misinterpreted, because we didn't give enough guidance. And I would like to stop that, or at least minimize that. And that's why we're creating the model. Like I said, we have models for non-lethal use of force. We have models for, traffic stuff. We have models for everything, but not this. So yes, we will be the first state, if the council chooses to adopt it, to try to get our arms around it and create those through lines.
Thank you for your amazing work, Tabitha. The question I have is around our current administration and thinking about, would anything kind of hurt the work that you're doing, around identity and gender? And, does anything you could foresee that may play a role in maybe like stopping it or hindering it in any way?
So I do this work across public sectors, like education, law enforcement, corrections, child welfare. I actually think law enforcement and corrections are two fields that are most protected in doing this work because you have to respond to identity. You have to respond to a hate crime. You have to take certain considerations into account as you do your jobs. So my short answer is there shouldn't be. However, we're seeing all kinds of creative things coming from the national perspective. The area where, I mean, again, like, and I saw this with Nick Demmel with the Department of Corrections, he's like, we have PREA, the Prison Rape Elimination Act, and that is a, you know, there's a gender responsivity component that it is a federal requirement that can't go away. So I do believe that we should be okay to do this. I think it would depend on where, like, you know, there's obviously some funding sources that may be more difficult to access, but I think that we can get creative with it. So for example, if you wanted to look at DOJ and juvenile justice reinvestment, I think there might be funding that we could pull from other places. And I know you have some nonprofit experts who are used to like doing things like that. Putting together lots of money to be able to do something. So long answer, but you should be okay because you are federally required to respond to identity.
Thank you so much, Dr. Moore, for this presentation, for your important work. I'm really curious about the work that you're doing with the local jurisdiction, with the agency, because I'm looking at our law enforcement folks, and I'm anticipating that they're thinking, how on earth would we ever fit this in? And so I'm interested in maybe perhaps a future presentation where you've got the data and you can demonstrate the impact of an implementation model so that we can have a really good sense of the cost benefit analysis.
Yeah.
Now, I'm all in, as you can imagine. I think that there's benefits to this approach that go even beyond identity.
Yeah.
And really, I really appreciate the depth and complexity of the modeling that you brought to us. It's not very often that we get to this place where we've got this big idea that breaks it down so far as to go into job task analysis. And so I think that there's a lot of potential here, and I appreciate the way that you have thought about what this could mean in terms of the tools that we give our officers who are out there in communities. As a member of the professional regulation subcommittee, I can say that in my observation that very often folks get in trouble around this issue, and they don't mean to get into trouble, right? They just don't mean to. It happens, and then we have to respond to it. But it would be great to prevent that.
That's what I'm hoping for. And I think to your point, like, my hope is that over the next month, I'm able to work with that department to look at, to continue, and then maybe they'll be willing to come back. But I will tell you that I worked with another department that created that identity responsive directive / kind of guidance for their officers as a community-based approach to it. And within a week or two of the training, I got a call from the chief saying, oh my gosh, they were able to use it. We had this situation and they said, they went back to it and we did this, this, and this, and we were able to validate the person even though there wasn't a criminal activity, and it was super helpful. So anecdotally, we know that from the ground up, it's helpful, but I think it would require some extensive either grant funding, or if the legislature wants to just throw some funding this way, we could do a 3-year longitudinal study in relationship with your university of choice.
She is not a paid actor.
If you're gonna do it, do it. That's my colloquial topic coming out. So yeah, I mean, you need money and you need time. And as your consultant who's an expert in this area, if you want to reduce the number of those second meetings related to this.
Hi, I'm Kelly from the Human Rights Commission. I just wanted to say thank you so much, Doctor. So happy to hear everything that you've been doing. I want to, kind of second Karen's remarks here. One thing, it seems to me that, potentially would be a selling point for this as well is officer safety. You know, when you're, you know, having a good rapport with the person that you stopped, tends to be that you're probably going to have a better chance of walking away from that interaction safely. So, you know, that's just my 2 cents to, you know, throw in that potentially for those that might be a little resistant to this model. I think that would be a big selling point. And I think we should, as the state of Vermont, be the first state in the union to roll this out. I mean, and what do we stand for if not full civil human rights here? So that's my 2 cents. I just wanted to say thank you and to give a resounding word of support here.
I think it's important that we note the resistance too, because it's not based in nothing. So if people are afraid or worried about what it would mean to implement this, then we need to have space for folks to be able to say that. Because if we leave people out, we create out groups that we can then be fighting. And I'm kind of over angry about it.
As long as it's okay. Well, first of all, you need to watermark this. I was telling Lisa, like, where is your signature on all of this? So it's copied. We're very fortunate to have you doing what I think is the next iteration and is even responsive to the national conversation about everyone needing a particular kind of approach and protection. And that kind of brings me to my first question or comment. You talked a lot about the dishwasher and the protocol, and I see this eventually becoming modular, where you're talking about race and mental health. You're talking about being a homeless youth. You're talking about DV and language access. And these are really important building blocks so people can have those intersectional conversations without feeling really woo-woo, but that it is, you know, you have to build toward being culturally specific and having those files, you know, ready in your brain and the language around it. Two, I hope this creates also a policy feedback loop to the legislature. For example, I was very worried when the Senate, I'm not sure if it passed fully, but the Senate passed legislation to criminalize certain types of mufflers. And I had such a reaction, you know, having an immigrant dad whose muffler was always falling off as a kid, and the police were super nice about it in LA was really helpful. I was worried that we didn't write the bill with enough consideration for how you implement that when you could target someone who feels triggered based on their income or the car that they have. And then finally, Dr. Nasreddin Longo, you know, asked me to put in language years ago for an extra day for the police academy and this word, and then it got walked back somewhere through the process. So just know the legislature is very committed to this conversation. I won't speak out of turn, but you know, we have gotten quite far in that conversation, and then it just the language and the coalition hasn't been clear enough for us to get it across the finish line. So I do hope we see that this year.
Just say that we've gone through a lot of work, and we're still in the process of the updated IATLAS curriculum that's, you know, in good work and good work in progress. It's a lot of work just when you look at just the fair and partial policing block of curriculum. It's 7 hours, and Mara did it, I don't know, pretty close to the 7 hours, but like there was a lot of stuff that she had to adjust to and get used to, and all of it's new, right? From people. Keep in mind, all the stuff that we're talking about, we rely on volunteer instructors because we don't have staff to do that. So the law enforcement community, which is hurting for people, are the ones that we're asking, hey, can you give us that person who trains this for nothing, by the way? And that's the way that they support the academy. But one of the things that I think Tabitha's done really well is work parallel to IATLAS in their job task analysis of what does law enforcement say they need to do for law enforcement services that they're providing. And she's integrated a separate, here's identity-based policing, but then she's taken it a step further and saying, by the way, you're already doing these things under these policies, and I'm documenting it for you. So here's where you could add a couple of more into that lesson without changing the entire lesson. So she's really helped us in that respect. And so I see a lot of this as opportunity for in-service training that we could just create a new in-service training and get some of this work that was done for us already in the books. Now, having said that, that's one of those things that who signs up for in-service training about identity-based policing? How do you make that sound fun, exciting? How do you make that sound? This is where when you pose that to folks, that this is going to keep you out of trouble. This is going to make your interactions with folks better, right? Like this is going to solve a lot of things that don't even come on the horizon just because you recognize it. So we do have opportunities in front of us. I will be the first one to tell you that we need money, but this isn't all about money. This is like, where do we have opportunities to do what we can do?
So I have to admit, I'm a recovering former legislator.
Hi, Bush.
And I appreciate you saying they need money to would this, and I hope the legislators in this room are listening. So many times during my other career, would have people come and say, we need money, and we need to provide you with the why. And and we need to provide you with a path forward so that the request stays a request and stays within the budget. What I've learned in the past 6 months that I've been sitting here is so often the academy and all the training they do is the youngest child, and they get thrown out first, and that can't keep happening if we keep asking the training folks to do more and more and more work. You have a great program. You can't get it in and pay for it, and all your work, doctor, is gone. So we need you all here. Thank you for being here to carry that message for the council. It's an important message right now. Like the director says, our instructors are volunteers. I got to say to you, that's pretty sad. We have a facility here staffed by great people, and we have to rely on volunteers. And then you all are asking for people with good certifications, put them in the field, and not have to worry about it. So Senator Ron, please remember that they need money.
You should add government affairs to Lisa's job. It was texting, like today is the day. So I think there's just been some disconnect when the time is critical.
Sure.
But yeah, I mean, honestly, texting the Senate majority.
I think maybe
way to get them.
That is very Vermont. That's just saying, it's a place that you can do that.
Butch had such good remarks that I forgot all about it. Thank you, though.
Yes, and to that point, the legislature did provide for us the community inclusion director position and our fair and impartial policing trainer, because there was never a statewide trainer for that. So when I appreciate everybody asking for money on my behalf, it's not like we haven't gotten anything. The legislature does hear us and does take us when times are good, and when there's additional funding that they can allocate to things that mean something, they do take those steps and do it. But it is a continual process where we're responsible for certifying every Vermont law enforcement officer in this state. And the majority of our reliance is on volunteers in order to do that. And that's because they're the ones that are doing it every day. And we pick the best of the best to make sure that they're training folks the right way, that the way that we want the way Vermonters expect to be policed in this state. So we do take all of that into account. We do appreciate the funding that we do get, but we'll always ask for it.
Questions, just an observation. I come on the council, I come from a higher education, adult training, education, training background. And as we watch, I think this is a good example. We're going through the IATLS project, and quite honestly, I was a little bit astounded when I came on this chair of the council about how much the academy runs on love. Coming from my higher ed background. As we move into how the contemporary theories and approaches of delivering training and its effectiveness, etc., that requires support, and it's just an ongoing piece. I'm not going to be, but it's plug for most of the resource, but I mean that's the bottom line. The complexity of the environments that we were in delivering training, creating training, delivering the training, assessing that, not just in an immediate sense, but an ongoing career impact. How are things longitudinal? Right? You put that a number of times today. It's just the environment that we're in. We can leverage technology, certainly. But that also requires a certain amount of expertise and support to do that. So it's an ongoing challenge. It's not unique, but
if I could just say, I'm going into my 14th year in the legislature, and I just learned today that the training is done by volunteers. So it is just, really important that we are in communication. And, I think I've served on some of the committees that would have known that, but I didn't know that.
For almost 40 years in higher ed, I can hear the faculty laughing when I would ask them to volunteer to do something.
Right. Well, and it limits who they're getting exposure to, who can afford to volunteer, who's going to get that permission.
Like being a legislator or something.
Okay. Well, thank you, Tabitha. I think the discussion will continue. Follow up from January, so we have some continuity and where we're going, and tying into the other piece I've been sitting in on is the IATLS project. Just kind of understanding how that's been rolling out is, I think, very important part of the curriculum development and improvement. And I think a part that we don't want to miss that you said is if you embed things across the curriculum, they're more powerful than doing them individually. Hoping that this one time transmit concept. So to the degree that things can be reinforced, because we like to chop things into nice categories and everything, but the reality is life is messy and everything's interrelated. So to the degree we can do that across all domains, the better. So, okay. I'm going to turn the floor over to Executive Director Raquel for our last substantive item on the agenda.
Yes.
Which I'm sure will potentially generate some conversation, unless this is the preface to what we have to do later in the year. All right.
This is crunch time. I'm going to keep this to a bare minimum. So Vermont law enforcement has mandatory in-service training requirements that they're required to do every year. The council has to vote on what those requirements are going to be for in-service training. So this is a conversation to start, because by December 1st, we have to notify law enforcement what mandatory in-service training is required. And that's by council rules. So for 2025, this year, it is currently 30 hours of in-service training, which includes first aid and CPR, firearms qualification, CEW, if carrying, conducted electrical weapons for those that don't know the acronym, use of force, 4 hours with a certified instructor, mandatory this year, fair and partial policing training. And we made the recommendation last year to include code of conduct training and scope of authority training and mental health training, all of which were not adopted by the council. And I think with good reason, there was discussion from former Chief Frank at that time that she felt that it wasn't responsible. I'm speaking on her behalf, even though she's not here. She felt that it was the responsibility of the council and not law enforcement agencies to do their own training on code of conduct, scope of authority, and mental health training. I would argue a little bit on the mental health training because I think those needs are different to each community and the communities, whatever the struggles are that they're facing. So at any rate, those three recommendations, the last ones were not. And then all agencies are required to give us copies of all of their policies. What we're going to have to do by December 1st is have a discussion on what is mandatory in-service training going to look like for next year. And knowing that we have to do that by December 1st, I'm hopeful that bringing that up today is going to spark some consideration from my law enforcement partners on this council to go back to their communities and have this discussion, right? Because we talk a lot here about training for competency, getting away from hourly requirements. Hourly requirements, and I think Karen will attest to this, when we talk about even domestic violence used to be a 4-hour block. Like, why are we setting hourly requirements when we're trying to teach something and improve competency? So I want to keep that piece in mind when we have this conversation moving forward. We could stick to what we currently do, 30 hours, keep the same trainings and just switch it to domestic violence for next year instead of fair and impartial policing, which is the way that it's been done. But the code of conduct training, we do have an online version that folks can take that we put together. Same with the scope of authority training. So if that's something that agencies feel that they need, or the council feels that agencies need to be more acutely aware of, we do have those two trainings already developed. So those are opportunities for us to put and think about whether we want that for in-service training. So this is, again, just a reminder, December 1st is when we have to have that by. We should have some larger discussion and a lot of input from law enforcement, who's the one that's going to have to do this training. We also have IADLIST approved training, which is on our website that they can pick and choose from. We don't tell agencies what they can and can't train to, because every agency has a different specific need, but we do have mandatory requirements that they have to report to the council. So this is a bigger conversation about how do we want to stick with the current model that currently exists, where we want to morph that or change that, and then how much is enough and how much is too much, knowing that some of this, if it's mandatory and it's in person, some of that requires overtime from agencies too. So that balance of the ability for agencies to accomplish what we're asking them to do versus what is the responsibility as a law enforcement officer to have for updated training. So I'll leave it there because I can keep it within that window of time. I'm happy to entertain any questions or comments if anybody has them about that, but this is really just for future conversation, remembering that the date is by December 1st.
Sounds like we'll need to have that on the agenda for action into November. So we could follow that deadline.
Yep.
Folks, keep that in mind, and yes, we should be prepared to have that conversation on the agenda shortly. It'll be November before we know it. So great, thank you. We are at the last item on the agenda of general discussion. We've been generally discussing a lot of things, so I don't have any other observations unless some of our visitors, particularly our legislative delegation, has. Share with meeting. By the way, they don't normally go to Camp Farmers. I'm not sure. Kind of blown through our schedule. Go to their done. Thank you. Then, and I have looked at the schedule, and I'm gonna look at Lindsay. I'm guessing she's probably sending messages somewhere like, we're supposed to be finishing lunch now. It's starting our other program. So, do we have any guidance from the executive director and administrative director on what we should do next?
Skip lunch.
No, no. Lunch is actually right across the
Oh, it's
hallway
here.
in a break room. Yep, if you didn't want to interrupt in here, so it's almost directly across the hallway there. There's a lunch set up, so feel free to grab it and come back in or fill it out.
Keep the canines at bay for a few more minutes. Then I will entertain a motion to adjourn and proceed quickly to lunch. Sheriff Anderson and Bruce Stedman. I think all those in favor.
Aye.
Okay, by a clean, the meeting is now adjourned.
Thank you, Chair.
12:28 PM.
Unofficially, just I know legislators would want to say thank you for all the volunteer work you put in and all of the talent you bring to public safety in the state. And I think you know this, but you're so lucky to have Lisa, Ryan. I'm talking vicariously, but you know, like just